started. And,
Thanks.
yeah, no problem. And yeah, if at any point you guys are having accessibility issues, you can't hear the audio, you're having a little bit of trouble, post that in the chat. And as Sarah said, if you have questions as we go, we're more than happy to pause and take questions as we talk about these topics. Great. So the first slide is what you think it might be. What is open access? And there's definitely a lot of ambiguity around the term open access. So to start, looking at a definition here from Spark, which is a scholarly publishing academic resources coalition. So open access is the free, immediate, online availability of research articles combined with the rights to use these articles fully in the digital environment. So, a lot of adjectives in that, and we're going to break it down a little bit. And it makes more sense as we go into the different types of open access journals, and also more of a overview of the ecosystem of what is open generally. So talking about background, I always like to talk about history and how sort of movements get started, and how do you sort of analyze them now that it's 20 plus years into open access. And of course the antecedents go much further back, but so one of the seminal moments was the Budapest Open Access Initiative, which was a conference in February 2002. And a quote from this conference that I think really speaks to what is open access, what is open, is they say, an old tradition and a new technology have converged to make possible an unprecedented public good. So I think that's a really strong statement, and encompasses a lot of the ideals and goals of open access as a movement, as a socio-technical initiative. And what do they mean by old tradition? Well, old tradition refers to publishing. It refers to scholars sharing their knowledge, their research, and new technology refers to the internet, and so network computers. And so they talk about, in 2002, two methods of achieving this unprecedented public good. And one of them was self-archiving. So that would be, and we'll talk more about this, depositing your research manuscripts, so your research articles, but now it's expanded to data and the different artifacts of your research, objects, self-archiving, and then new journals. So they talked about how these new journals will no longer invoke copyright to restrict access to and use of the materials they publish. Instead, these new journals will use copyright and other tools to ensure permanent open access to all of the articles they publish. So I wanted to start there with sort of a little bit of the background of this movement. Obviously, when you talk about movements, you could think of it top down or bottom up, but some of these seminal statements are really helpful to think about the issue. And then just to break it down a little bit more of, well, what is free? Free is a ambiguous term in English, right? It could mean two things. So it's broken down into gratis, which is for free. That means like no money. And libre, which refers to free as in freedom, so little or no restrictions. So new models of publishing is what we're talking about. Maybe not so new, now that it's 2020, but still, as in any social movement, it takes time, and communities build tools and practices as they go. So a helpful way of thinking about open access is how it compares to more traditional publishers. So if we look at, so on the right we have these are just generalizations about traditional publishing and generalizations about open access publishing. So you can see on the right, in traditional publishing, there's been a tremendous price increase in the cost of journal subscriptions over the years. Librarians have talked about this as a serials crisis, where the publishers are charging libraries so much money in subscription that it's really untenable. And a good sort of analogy, we have Elsevier, that's the Dutch publishing giant. There are other large commercial publishers, but a good analogy is to think of it like a cable subscription. So they say in this big deal, big package, that you either get all of these journals at this price, or if you want an a la carte version, it's going to cost you a lot of money anyway. So it's been driving up the cost, whereas on the open access side, the prices are generally more transparent, and there are many nonprofit models. And we'll talk more about APCs in the next slide. So in the traditional publishing environment, generally there are limited readers. You need a subscription to access the content, and you get that subscription through an institution, usually an institution's library. But if you are from part of the world where or you're an unaffiliated scholar, you don't have that access. So talking about the unprecedented public good, on the open access side, it's global readers. So all you need is the internet, and really, actually, all you need is a computer, because for the most part, open access articles can be downloaded and shared. Traditional publishing, restrictive author agreements, and restrictive or unclear licenses in general. So that's talking about copyright as a way to limit access. Whereas in open access in general, there are author agreements and which allow the authors to retain copyright and permission to share the work with clear licenses. So that's using copyright and as permission to share the research output and make sure that's being able to be shared in the future perpetually. And then there are content embargoes in the traditional publishing world, which we'll talk a little bit more about. That's, giving the publisher exclusive access to that article for a set period of time before it's opened up. Whereas in the open access side, when something's published, it's going to be immediately available. So you could think of why that might be important, especially with the pandemic in the back of our minds or in the front of our minds, really. Why it's important to have quick access to research, and sometimes problematic, of course. And then in the traditional publishing environment, as the last point, there have been problems with digital preservation. So open access in a technical way also supports digital preservation. And what I mean by that is, if you think about traditional journals, they were published in paper, right, printed, distributed to libraries that subscribed or individuals. And so you had a collection of books, of journals, paper that you treated like a normal book on the shelf. It's good. Paper lasts, a couple hundred years if it's not very acidic. So when we're talking about online digital, so digital publications, the issue of digital preservation was something that open access now supports, without getting to too much detail there. So there's a lot of text on this slide. I apologize, but I want to break it down just looking at the top half first. So I think that, so open, what is open access open? I say many flavors and colors. That's to say there are, as you see in the bottom, all these different colors and sort of this jargon around different types of publishing models. Flavors, kind of what is the broader ecosystem of open. So a lot of times open access, which again is referring to research articles or research products, it gets confused a lot with open source. So I like start with that, just to disambiguate the terms. Open source is referring to computer programming where the source code, which is like the recipe of the software, is being freely shared. So there's permission to use, reuse, and study collaboratively. So, if you think about the history of computing, in the post-World War II setting, people working together collaboratively achieved a lot more by sharing you could just think about it, sharing recipes. So there's the computer science aspect, and that's open source. Now another open term is open science. And so I have the terms broken down there. Open data, open methodology, open peer review, open access, open educational resources. So that kind of is like the life cycle of open science, where you're taking each individual aspect of the concept, right? Open science, starting with the data and all the way to the end products, which is open access, publishing your work, and then even further out, teaching, pedagogy, so open educational resources. And without going into too much detail about open science, it's really Much science nowadays is occurring in the realm of big data, where you're using these massive data sets to, produce research outputs. That fourth paradigm, as computer scientist Jim Gray had outlined. So you're only able to do that when you share the data, and much more can be accomplished if you're just looking in the scientific realm by sharing that data. But it obviously relates to every aspect of knowledge creation, humanities, social sciences, everything, where more sharing is going to produce better outcomes and better public good. So moving on, licenses, we have think about licenses as permissions to use the work. Um, we had a whole webinar on the Creative Commons and copyright, and it gets really a bit in the weeds of the technicalities, but there are important terms to research and understand. And one of them is the Creative Commons, which is a license. It's an organization started pretty much, you could think, around the same time as that Budapest Initiative in the early 2000s. And it is the mechanism that allows uh, open access to function. Think about licenses as permissions that you're giving others to use your work. Okay, so now in bold, we have some of the different publishing models for open access publishers. And, it's really hard to keep up with because they do change and they've evolved over time. And these are a bit of like jargon terms. But the overarching principles, it's important to know, especially as you think about what type of journal do I want my research to end up in, what the different models are. So if we look at what is green open access, that can be kind of distinguished from the others, because green open access is a repository-based mechanism. So that means you're depositing your work into a repository. So one example of that is we have Toro Scholar here at Toro, where you could self-archive your papers, be that your preprint, your accepted manuscript, different stages of your manuscript. But obviously there are preprint servers. So Archive, ARXIV, is a prominent preprint archive, bioarchive. So these are pre-peer review. There's no peer review generally. It's all the products before that aspect of publishing. And that's green open access. Gold open access is the most common, and that's where instead of you having to pay as a reader, or an institution paying your half through subscription, the material is released, open access, but it's publishing is paid for by these APCs. So that's article processing charge. There's also book processing charges. These are fees. They could be anywhere from a few $100s to a few $1,000s that are paid to the publisher to publish your work, which then allows it to be released open access. There's bronze open access, and so that means that the content is being released for free, gratis, right? So you don't have to pay to read it, but there's no clear license on it. So not Libre generally. And it's also important to say with the green open access, right, your preprints, a lot of that is just gratis. There's not a clear license attached to it. But that's the case of bronze. It's a mixture, I guess, of gold and green. You could think of it that way. Then there's diamond, which is no APC, free to readers. Usually that journal is going to be supported by donations or an institution. And there's these other models too, like we talked about embargoes, delayed open access. So the content is free after a set period of time. That allows the publisher to collect subscription. They have exclusive access for a certain amount of time, but it delays how many people can see the product of your research because it's embargoed. And then the last term kind of describes the journals in total. So a hybrid journal would be one that is not all open access and it's not all closed access. Closed access meaning you have to pay subscription, paywall. It's a mixture of both. And now a vast majority of the commercial publishers are in fact hybrid. They're going to have open access options as well as those journals or options for publishing in a journal where it's going to be closed access.
All right, thank you, Tim.
Mm.
So now that you know a little bit about the flavors and the colors of open, I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about the benefits of open access journals and publishing in them. Some of them are already like what Tim talked about. Like, so one of the things is you will get a wider and speedier exposure. And the reason for that is that when you publish it in an open access journal, it is right away available to the public and it will be posted on the website of the publisher. So right away, it will be exposed to a lot more people. It could be exposed globally to basically to everyone. Whereas in traditional ones, there's the paywall, and we talked already about it, that, you know, if you are not affiliated with, say, for example, Turo, then a lot of the articles that have been published, when you sign the copyright form for the article that you submitted to the publisher, you basically give your rights away, and then the publisher keeps the article in his behind his walls, behind the walls, and there is no way that, you know, people can access it for a long time. So it's sometimes between 6 months to 1 year or 2 years even that people do not have access to it. So except for a small group of people who are, I consider them privileged, who have access to that article, many other people in the world do not have access to those articles. And if you look at COVID-19 right now, with all the problems and, you know, that we have in the preliminary research that has been published, yes, it might be not complete. It might be just like a study on a very small group, but the information needs to be out there for the whole world. And if it's going to be like some articles that are going to be published and then they will be published in 2 years to every, so accessible for everyone in 2 years later, who cares? By that time, either we are all dead or you know, that was very, but, or, you know, we have already solved the problem in another way. So the point is like sharing it as much as possible with everyone. By sharing it with everyone, we can also increase the usage, obviously, and the impact goes up. The impact of the article goes up. The other thing that can be done with an open access article is that immediately people can tweet that article to their friends, to their, you know, group of other scientists, researchers. And this has been done many times. And you are not infringing copyrights with that, because it is an open access article, and it's usually it's under CC license. So again, the metrics goes up. So, and by metrics and alt metrics here, we are talking about like alternate metrics. So the old-fashioned metrics, we have the bibliometrics, and these are like the metrics that are showing, for example, how people are actually interacting with the research that they found, and then share it on popular platforms like Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that. And Plumex is collecting those interactions and provides it as an insight. So on Turo Scholar, if you go back later on, our institutional repository, and look at different articles, you see on the right side, there is like a little sign, a Plumex sign, and if you click on it, it shows people who have interacted with your article, and it has been tweeted, and who has tweeted it, or what has been said about it. So these are new, sort of like newer things, not new, but newer things, and these are only, you know, achievable by open access. Tim has already talked about copyright versus CC licenses. Many of the open access articles have a Creative Commons attribution, which is one license of the CC licenses, and it gives you permission as a user to use the article, to even remix it with other pieces of information if they want to, but they still have to give you the attribution, saying this article was written by Dr. So-and-so, and I'm using this. So the attribution is still there, but you give the people the freedom to use it in any way they want to, and they need to. So also one of the benefits of open access articles is that it can be easily, in fact, right away can be deposited in the institutional repository of your institution. Whereas many times with the traditional ones that we sign our copyright with the publisher away, we just have to, we can only add our preprints into the institutional repositories. And what do I mean by preprints? Most of the time, preprints are articles that have been already peer-reviewed and that they have been officially accepted for publication, but the copy editing part is missing. So it's not copy edited, but other than that, the article is the same. It's going to be the one that is going to be published. Most of the time, it's like this. With the COVID-19 preprints, things are a little bit different. Sometimes I have seen that not all of them are actually peer-reviewed yet. But that's usually the traditional way. And if you're like me, I lost my preprints from the traditional, publications that I, shared with the publisher. I never, remember where I put my preprints, and basically that means that in Turo Scholar, I only have like a link to the publisher or just a citation, but you don't have access to the actual article. And then the FASTA output. The FASTA output is really something that people have asked me about. They have said to me, you mean it's a good thing that it's faster? Or what do you mean by FASTA output? And to be honest, I think it's just meant it in comparison to traditional journals. The channels of submitting articles and the channels of distributing the article for peer review, they have become faster and more modern, but faster is not necessarily a good thing. And the way I see it, even in publishing in open access journals, it takes between 3 to 9 months easily. And one of the tricks that I've seen people are, that the predatory journal publishers are doing is like when you Google fast publishing journals, what comes up is most of them are like predatory journals. So the word fast has become one of those keywords that, the predatory journals know exactly that it will bring you to their publications. So we want to avoid that actually if possible. And in the end, I just want to quickly talk about open peer reviewing, which sometimes goes hand in hand with open access, and people sometimes confuse it. But open access journals do not necessarily have open peer reviewing, an open peer review process. An open access journal can be blind or double blind, have a blind or double blind peer review, or they could be open peer review. So it depends, it's different. But the open peer review is really something that deserves its own webinar. And I'm hoping that maybe for next semester, I wanna give a webinar on the difference between, the traditional peer reviewing versus the open peer reviewing. But the point is that with open peer review, several things happen. First of all, the peer reviewer is acknowledged for all the work they're doing. I don't know, some of you have probably been peer reviewers, but it's a very, very difficult work to do. It takes a lot of time. I have done peer reviewing many, many times, and each time I accept an article, I say, oh, this is a piece of cake. I will be done in 2 hours. And then it's like 20 hours later, and I'm still toiling over it. So, so it makes it hard, really hard. So with an open peer review, you get acknowledged. Now, the point is, like, sometimes people are not happy that their names are out as peer reviewers because they think that it might not be, first of all, they're afraid that there might be retaliation involved in it. There's also sort of like a power kind of relations, unfortunately, in some, circles, academic circles. And they're also, worried that maybe if the name of the publisher, the peer reviewer is out, the peer reviewer is not going to be that strict because he's afraid, or they are afraid that, the feedback would be like, you're too harsh. So there are good things about it, and there are some other things that, have to be solved somehow. But if the publisher, the editor, the peer reviewer, and the author work together, usually they create a more richer text, really a scientific text. So that goes what I wanted to say about this. So next page, please. So that leads me actually to my favorite topic, the predatory journals and publishers. And I have given webinars before on this. What happens is that with this beautiful open access model, some people out there in the world have taken advantage of it and turned it into sort of like a, seedy business, into sort of like a predatory business, a fake business, and the whole point of them is to get the money out of your pocket. So if we can play a very, very short video on predatory journals, I will get back to you in a minute after that.
As you work to publish your scholarship, you will need to learn to avoid predatory publishers. Predatory publishers are publishers that are focused on profit and not scholarly promotion and excellence. Legitimate open access journals may require fees in order to pay for website maintenance and the work involved in peer review and publication. Predatory publishers will charge fees without providing the same rigorous academic experience such as peer review or copy editing in order to maximize profits. In addition to predatory journals, there are also vanity presses that will offer to print scholarly monographs on demand for pay. If a journal does not appear to be applying rigorous academic standards, appears notably aggressive in pursuing submissions, and charges fees, you should attempt to verify the journal's standing and reputation. See the video Identifying Predatory Publishers for more information.
Okay. So you saw the pirates came for your money. And that is really, that's a good actually comparison. They are pirates. So a few red flags, and again, this is another webinar. It deserves another webinar, and I have done it before, and I'm more than happy to give another webinar on this. But one of the red flags is lofty emails. And we have at least one person on this call that I know that she was always very, very careful. She got these lofty emails and would come back to the library and say, look at this journal. It's, trying to say that, they want me to submit an article to them. You think this is really something that should be done. But lofty emails, sometimes at the beginning, years ago, it was like they would say, "Dear Dr. Tabai, we are impressed with your fantastic scientific research on nutrition." And I'm like, okay, great, perfect. Yeah, I didn't know that I'm a doctor and I'm a nutritionist. So there we go. So it already started fine. So, but now they have become more clever. I have seen people have shared their emails with us, and we have seen that they have become much smarter, and they really check the person out. They check the expertise of the person out, and then they send another email and ask for the same thing. The other thing is, like, many times these emails are written with terrible grammar mistakes and spelling mistakes. So it turns you off right away. And if that's the case, don't even go further. They promise fast publishing, and that's, one of those things that you have to be very careful, because the reason they can publish fast is because they don't care about peer reviewing. So yes, of course, they get your article, they don't even read it, they just want your money, and then they post it. So the other thing that you should check on the website of the publisher is that, there's no information about copyright or the author's right or CC licenses or anything, or it's very vague. The APC, which is the article processing charges fees. Usually good journals, especially scientific journals, the APC is quite high. It's between $2,000 and $4,000, or something like that. Some places the institutions pay for it, but they're quite high. So if it's not mentioned, or if the fee is very, very low, then you should be a little bit suspicious. But what I have, one experience was, like, one of our faculty, she sent an article to a predatory journal. She didn't pay attention, and once she realized it, she said to me, "What should I do?" And I said, "Well, see if you can get it back." but she never could get it back. And then they asked, actually, say for example, if at the beginning they say $200, now they wanted $700. So she finally just negotiated with them the price down. She was a tough cookie, so she could do that. She negotiated with them, and she brought the price down to $200 again, but they never gave her the article back. So you work sometimes on an article very, very hard, maybe sometimes for years, and if that happens, then it's really hard to get it back from them. And they publish it many times, even if you say you don't want it to be published. And basically that's then, as we say, it's not kosher anymore than to publish your article in another place. There are other ways around it, and I don't want to talk about it now, but there are other ways that maybe you can get it back from them, but it's really hard. There's no editorial policies and peer reviewing. Sometimes it's unclear. And what I have seen is like they take actually pictures and profiles from other schools and journals and put them on their own website. And if you look at some of the profiles, the pictures are very distorted, or like, they look like not like good quality pictures. I would be right away a little bit suspicious about those things too. But there was a person that I actually contacted, and I said, are you on this journal? Are you really an editor? And the person said, I didn't even know that my name is there. So it's pretty scary. Also, many times links are not working. They say, come to Facebook, come to Twitter, and let's socialize. And when you click on their links, none of them are working. And finally, the headquarters. One of the best stories I have is that they gave an address in California, and I checked the address on Google Maps. And when I checked on Google Maps, I saw that it took me to a beautiful, beautiful house in California with like 6 bedrooms, a beautiful pool, fantastic view, for sale. So that was their headquarters address. So it's quite interesting. I'm very fascinated by them actually, how far they go to get some money. But we have to be really careful and keep our eyes open. Okay, next slide, please. So what else can we do to not fall prey for to these predatory journals? There's one more very, very short video that I want Tim to play for us. It's called Think, Check, Submit. So Dr. Amar really likes this. So I posted it. So let's listen to this.
You've done your research and are ready to publish. Sharing your results with the world is key to the progress of your discipline and to your career. Publishing your work with an untrustworthy journal has the potential to damage your career. With the number of journals growing at around 3.5% annually, and almost 1,000 new journals launching in 2014 alone, how can you choose a trusted journal for your research? Think, check, submit. Before you decide, step 1. Think. Can I trust this journal with my research? Do I need more information before I can decide that this is a trusted journal? Step 2. Check. Does the journal publish research that you would read yourself? Can you tell which organization publishes the journal? Can you contact them easily if you need to? Does the journal have editorial policies in place? And do they conduct appropriate peer review? Does it charge publication fees? And are they clear about how much they cost? Do you know the names or reputations of any of the editorial board members? Are articles in the journal indexed in any of the services that you use? Step 3. If you can answer yes to most of these questions, then submit. By following these 3 steps, you can identify which journals will reliably publish your work and make an impact in your field. When you finish your next article, remember to think, check, then submit. Check the website for more tips to help you find a trusted journal for your work.
Okay, so no, go back. So there's also like a think, check, submit for conferences, because there are also predatory conferences now out there, and people have actually contacted me about those too. That, you know, they ask for pretty much a lot of money, obviously, for conferences, and then, you know, when people go there, there's just a few speakers. None of them are the speakers that, you know, the keynote speakers that they mentioned that they will, you know, that they have invited and stuff like that. So there is more information on that. The journal evaluation rubric I will share with you, that was put together by a few librarians in another college, where you can go through like different questions and ask yourself, you know, is this, you know, the journal, who is the publisher, how many years has it been in business, and stuff like that. And it goes over for, you know, two pages long, different questions. They're very quick to answer though, don't worry. So, and then you can see if you get to a good point where you can decide this is a good journal or not. The Beals list is a librarian, Mr. Beal, who a few years ago started with putting together a list, a blacklist of like the different publishers and journals that are predatory. And he was adding quite a few publishers. Some of them were only low quality and not necessarily predatory. And if you think that some of these journals come from developing countries, maybe where the English is not perfect, where the way of business is a little bit different. So, you know, we have to be careful of those two and keep them in mind. But what happened to Mr. Bill is, like, after a while, he was getting threats from different publishers that he should pull down the list and not have it on the internet. And he got really forced finally to do so. And I think his university also, you know, was like getting to a point where they were like, okay, we don't want to get sued, so take it down. And that's what he did. But he was like really, really upset. The point is, like, librarians never give up. So we, and by we, I mean librarians, we took the list. We, you know, have now an anonymous list, and different librarians in different colleges work on an anonymous list of the same blacklist publishers of journals, and we keep it alive. So not everything has gone to waste. And the other place where you can look is Cabell's. It's a database that the library owns. It's not perfect at all, and it's not comprehensive at all, but it's a good start. So next page, please. So here is a series of, you know, different lists and resources for trustworthy open access journals. I have created a guide a year ago or so. I can show you that very quickly at the end. And we have like another guide that Tim found from Cornell. So check those out. In the Scopus, which is a library database, if you go to that database under sources, you can find thousands and thousands of journals. You just limit your search to OA, and you can find many open access journals available to you based on discipline, and I'm more than happy to show you that at the end, how to do that. We have obviously the Directory of Open Access Journals, which is very strict with the standards of what is an acceptable open access journal. It's very, very strict. They have their own criteria, and whoever wants to be on the DOAJ list is really, you know, basically accepted as to being on the white list. And it's like really not so easy to get on that list. We have also OASPA, and which is like, Tim, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So one good way also is to look at make sure, yeah. If they're professional organizations that have, you know, community standards, best practices, and OASPA, actually we could go out and look at some of the links too. They list members in this association, and so in that case, it's kind of like a white list, and you could see, you know, if the publisher that you're evaluating is on the list, generally it's going to be a good sign. And also we could look at DOAJ. They have a great site that you could search based on subject, and you could find specific articles, and they list here what is the requirements to get indexed by them. As Sarah had mentioned, there's a strict set of standards that each journal has to meet to be listed on the DOAJ website. And then, also large publishers now have finding tools on their own websites. Now, of course, it's pointing to their own journals. But if you're thinking about, where do I submit my article to? And just like in the Think, Check, Submit video where they mentioned, think about where your peers are publishing and what you read. Another way is to look at the tools that these publishers have. They'll, you could submit an abstract or just a title and a subject, and it gives you some recommendations. So that might be a little confusing because sometimes the discussion of open access is always like open access versus traditional publishing. But as I hope we kind of shown is that there's a melding of the two now, and because it's so far into this movement, or the different adoptions of practices. So, Springer Nature, Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, these big publishers have their own tools.
Okay, thank you. And then if you just want to go to the Turo LibGuide, because a lot of the things that I said today is on that guide. So I wanted to show you that. So you have to go to the library's website, which is a little bit different than the library website from Turo Harlem and Middletown. But you know how to get to it. It's just turolib.org, and then you have to go to the LibGuides. And then on the faculty.
It's in a couple spots, faculty,
yeah.
and
then,
research and scholarship.
And then go on the research and scholarship, yes. And then here is a lot about how to publish, what to avoid, what to pay attention, impact factor. And there's some of the stuff that I just mentioned today. If you go back to the open access one. And then, so we talk about a little bit of the benefits, and it's here. There's more about why it should be open access. And then, it talks about PLOS, which I didn't mention. It's in the slides, which is one of the most reputable open access journals. And it's like, health sciences and medicine. So that is, a great place to publish. And they also have open peer review, actually. So there's a lot of good stuff in there. So that's just a good place to go back, the LibGuides, to check out on what we said. And it's much more, expanded and in much more detail, all the stuff that is available there for you. Also, the slides we will share with you. So we can send them to you later. Also, we're ready now for any questions if you have. And that's about it.